When done right, there is nothing quite as magnificent and as engaging and entertaining as the wrestling tournament. When done wrong, though, they do nothing but upset fans and devalue wrestlers.
And sometimes wrestling tournaments simply don't make any sense, rather by design or poor planning.
And as part of an ongoing series here at Special Guest Referee, we are looking at the best, worst, and weirdest wrestling tournaments.
And today we are going global, minus the force, to take a look at TNA's World X Cup from the mid 2000s.
Oh, he's been railing on the X Division. We've heard him week after week.
When TNA announced the World X Cup, I was excited. If you've ever seen my channel, you know I'm a big world sports guy. I love me some soccer, I'll watch some cricket, rugby, all of that stuff. And really, TNA was tapping into my love for global sports and new things, really. And I wasn't a huge fan of Japanese wrestling like I would obviously go on to be as I got older, but the World X Cup would be a introduction to many of its viewers on not only Japanese wrestling, but Mexican wrestling, Canadian wrestling, I suppose, to a certain extent, and of course, some of the best of the X division that TNA had to offer.
Also, with the X Division, a lot of the guys who were in the X Division at this time were also working in Japan or Mexico or Canada. And so they kind of knew a lot of their opponents. So that's why when we got a lot of these X Division matches or a lot of these X Division tournaments that were international, they were always pretty awesome because these guys knew how to work with each other.
Just to add on to that, the idea of a World Cup was perfect for TNA because it really tapped into a lot of the things they already had going on. You had the X Division, which was hugely exciting around this time. You had Team Canada, which was kind of their heel stable. I don't think it was ever truly like the biggest heel stable or the biggest heel faction, whatever you want to call it, but it was a thing that TNA had that did separate them. And of course, TNA has all of these connections with overseas promotions, AAA, New Japan or All Japan, CMML. So all of those get leveraged in the three World Cups that do take place between 2004 and 2008.
So then on that note, let's get into the first TNA X Cup from 2004.
2004 is a hell of a time for TNA because big things are happening. They're about to get their TV deal finally after 2 years with Fox Sports Net. Jeff Hardy's going to appear. They're getting more big names. It feels like they are finally gaining some traction in the world of professional wrestling. In what way to increase your status as a global player in wrestling than doing a World Cup type thing. The thing is, though, the World Cup was not the first sort of global tournament formatted thing. Before this, in 2004 and 2003, TNA had held the America's X Cup, which is, well, it's basically the same thing as the World Cup, just a little less well planned.
Yeah, and then before that, they did another tournament called the Super X Cup, which was just a single elimination tournament, and it had a lot of the same guys that we're going to be seeing in '04.
So let's just jump into that '04 World X Cup, which starts with a lot of preview matches. I believe there may be more preview matches than there are actual World X Cup matches, and I never fully understood why. Tim, do you have any ideas?
My only guess is that they just started doing the Fox Sports Net show, and they were doing the weekly pay-per-views along with it as well. So they usually taped 4 weeks of the Fox Sports Net show in 1 week, and then they just kind of filled in the gaps as they went along through the month. So a lot of times they would have these matches.
One of those warm-up matches was extremely interesting. It was a flag match involving Team Canada and it's technically Team USA. We'll get into that in a moment, but it's Team Canada and a group of Americans, and the match itself is pretty good. It gets a good amount of time. There's a story there with Eric Young and Petey Williams and Team Canada trying to fight off this team from NWA or TNA. Again, it's all confusing. They don't really know what they are at this point. But the Americans think they're going to win. Jerry Lynn's involved. And then just the ending is...
Yeah, it's confusing because not only do you have to get your flag, you have to get it, and then you have to place it on the other pole. But it looks like at some point Eric Young is going to put the flag there, but then he doesn't. And then Jerry Lynn, I believe, is going to put the flag there, but then he gets hit over the back with a hockey stick. And then Eric Young finally does it. So it was kind of confusing as to how you can actually put the flag on the post because you don't actually it doesn't actually fly. It's just kind of hanging on this pole.
I don't even know what the contraption was. It felt like it was almost like a pole holder because it's not like on the top of the ring post. It just sort of is set gently next to it. Let's just forget about that. Don't worry about the logistics. That's not important because all you need to know is Team Canada wins and Coach Scott D'Amore gives us a legendary celebration.
Probably the best thing about the entire tournament really is the celebration right here.
Scott D'Amore with an all-time celebration. Of course, that match didn't count in the standings for the TNA World X Cup. Again, not entirely sure why you wouldn't do it, but they just said, hey, here's a freebie for you. Now let's get into the real World X Cup competition. And, well, it's TNA in 2004. I hope you like gimmick matches.
And yeah, there were a lot of gimmick matches. The only time there wasn't a gimmick match was round 2 where there were tag matches. But the first round, we had a 16-man gauntlet match, which was actually pretty good. It was kind of slow in spots at the beginning, but when you had guys coming in every minute, it kind of make the match go a little bit faster. Hector Garza would win the first match, and then you'd have the tag matches second. Then we had ladder match, which the ladder match was actually pretty good. You had 4 guys in there, so it was going to be kind of crazy at times, but they managed to keep it together, and they managed to build it up to a spot where everybody was climbing the ladder towards the end. It wasn't like, normal ladder matches now where everyone just starts climbing at the beginning and there's mass chaos. It was more kind of building up towards the end, so I kind of liked this ladder match here.
Yeah, there was also a really good story behind it because Eric Young was the newest member of Team Canada, and Scott D'Amore was like, if you don't win, you're kicked out because Canada was trailing on points. So if they didn't win the ladder match, they wouldn't have a chance to advance to the finals. And we'll get into why a little later on. So yeah, you have this ladder match, and it's Eric Young, who we all know, Jerry Lind, a legend, Mr. Aguila, well-known in Mexico, and then someone who's going to become well-known, one Taichi Ishikari, who today we all know as Taichi from New Japan Pro Wrestling, looking a lot different here. He's very much in his shell. He looks like he looks like me, just fresh out of college, first job, not really sure what he's supposed to be doing or why he's even there, but trying to make it all work. Mike Tenay actually says this is his very first ladder match. I don't know if he got the memo. You don't need to wear your shirt in a ladder match. I found that hugely distracting because it's not like Taichi. I mean, I would say Taichi probably in a better shape than he is today when he's not wearing his shirt and ripping off his pants constantly. It's just really weird to see Taichi oversized shirt. You don't know, like, is he about to go to bed? Like, why are we doing this? Well, like you said, the ladder match, it's not the best ladder match you've ever seen, but compared to, say, I don't know, putting Dusty Rhodes and Brian Christopher in the ladder match, I think this was definitely an improvement there. And one of the few times TNA did get the ladder match right in those early days.
Yeah, this was one of the few good ladder matches from TNA out of 7 million that they had in the first 3 years of the promotion.
So with the results as they were, it meant Team Canada would advance to the final round, which was a 3-way, I don't want to call it a dance, but it's just a 3-way match. It's Team Canada, Team USA, actually we'll talk about that in just a second, but it was Team NWA and Team Mexico. The final team in the standings after the 3rd round would be eliminated. That was the Japanese team, so you get the final match. We need to talk about what exactly the American team is called here, because they're not Team America. Every other team, it's Team Japan, Team Mexico, Team Canada, and then you get Team NWA.
And it's also strange, too, that it's Team NWA, not Team NWA TNA, since that's the name of the promotion. So, I guess they didn't want to put the TNA name on this team for some reason, even though if you look at it now, if you look at results of the show, it says Team TNA, but that's not how they were posted on the show here.
They wouldn't even use American flag. Like, go back to the flag match we talked about. They're using an NWA flag. This is maybe the only case of professional wrestling in America not leaning into patriotism all of the way. Every other promotion ever in the history of America, when they can get a cheap pop for American pride and patriotism, they do it. And NWA TNA was like, no, we're going to focus on the brand. We're going to keep it NWA. And Mike Tenay calls them. It's like, this is Team NWA. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen. Like, we're not going to embrace American patriotism at all, even though we're wrestling in Nashville at the Asylum.
It's also weird too, because all of the guys on Team NWA are American too. It's not like, one of them is just some, like a European guy who that's why they called them Team NWA. No, all of these guys are American. Jerry Lynn's American, Daniels, Sabin, Elix Skipper, everyone is American. Well, maybe not Elix Skipper.
I mean, there were some traitorous issues back in WCW where his quote unquote CFL career linked him up with Team Canada and Lance Storm. Of course, that's all not true, and it was a bunch of nothing. Not the point, though. As you say, everyone here is an American. There was no reason for this not to be Team USA. I mean, maybe they just didn't want to buy an American flag, so they're like, oh, we just reuse this NWA flag.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because the flag touched the ground during the match, they didn't want the American flag to touch the ground. It's okay if the Canadian flag touches the ground, though, I guess, but not the American flag.
No, we can't have that. We do get the final match. It's a three-way match. Hector Garza from Team Mexico, Petey Williams, Team Canada. Oh, man, by the way, going back and watching this, like, peak Petey Williams was awesome. Yeah. We'll talk more about him as we go along. And then another awesome wrestler, Chris Sabin, who was representing Team NWA, fighting for, well, because of the way points worked out, the winner would take all here.
Yep, and they were fighting for an X because we didn't have a belt, so they were fighting for an X that's hanging from an X. And the Ultimate X, at this point, you said this was only the third Ultimate X up to this point, which I find crazy because they've done it about 17,000 more times after that. But man, when they first did this match, the Ultimate X match was like seeing something weird, because I don't think wrestling fans really could conceive the first time they saw the Ultimate X. By like the second or third time, it started to make sense. But man, the first few times of seeing this match, it was trippy because you're used to, like a ladder or climbing something. You weren't, used to guys climbing up and then having to shimmy themselves across a wire, and of course it accounted for so many awesome spots as well, which you'll see in this match.
The wrestlers themselves weren't always sure what to do with Ultimate X in those early days too. A lot of it is just experimental, a lot of trial and error, a lot of seeing what they could and couldn't do. And I think that's one of the things TNA did do well. They were never afraid to try new things. They struck out a lot over the years. But Ultimate X was one of the things they were able to make their own. As for the final match, the big story heading into it was the fact Jerry Lynn, the team captain for Team NWA, wasn't wrestling in the match. He handpicked Chris Sabin, and this was sort of a passing of the torch moment, I guess, because Chris Sabin's still really young, still really early in his career. And just to have Jerry Lynn say, I want you to do this, I'm not going to wrestle in this match, although if you watch the other matches, you could read the tea leaves because Jerry Lynn already wrestled twice. He wasn't going to wrestle a third time. Let's not get into that though. But it was a really cool sort of moment, just sort of seeing Jerry Lynn going, all right, Chris Sabin, you're sort of the future. You win this for Team NWA.
And Chris Sabin ends up winning the Ultimate X and thus winning the American X Cup for the Americans, or for NWA. So good for him. He was already a 2-time X Division champion at this point, which I thought was kind of crazy. And he would end up winning the X Division belt 10 times through his career, which is crazy. A lot of guys, though, in TNA had the X Division belts about a dozen times, so I guess it shouldn't be all that crazy.
The hottest of hot potatoes at times in TNA. What we saw, though, from the 2004 World X Cup would be the foundation for future editions. And the one thing TNA didn't go to the well, surprisingly, they didn't run it back a couple of weeks later like they did with gimmick matches. It would be 2 years before we saw the TNA World X Cup again. And this time, Chris Sabin would be captain of the team actually referred to as Team USA this time. No more Team TNA or Team NWA or Team Promotion. It was actually a nationality, which was, I think a common sense move finally. And this time it would be the same 4 competitors. It would be a team from Mexico, a team from Canada. Of course, although Team Canada in 2006 kind of on its last legs at this point. Like we've seen enough of Team Canada for 2 years. And then a team from Japan. That's the wildest team I ever seen. I had forgot this happened. I forgot this collection of wrestlers showed up. up in TNA, let alone competed in the World X Cup.
Yeah, I remember when we were going over this and I mentioned to you the Japanese team. And first I say the captain is Jushin Thunder Liger, which that sounds normal. That's fine. But then as you go through the rest of this list, it's kind of crazy. Hiroki Goto, Minoru Tanaka, and Black Tiger. I mean, that is a great team right there to be coming over to do this tournament.
Yeah, they're all part of Liger's Control Terrorism Unit. Terrible name for a faction, by the way. But for whatever reason, New Japan and a lot of those older wrestlers were, I guess, super into 2000 like action series because there's like a bunch of them just sort of named like that. But yeah, Control Terrorism Unit, CTU, was Liger's faction at the time. So he brings over Goto, still very young at this point in his career, Minoru Tanaka, Black Tiger. It's a really good team, though. And then you look at some of the other teams. Mexico has Shocker, Puma, Magno, Incognito. Maybe not the highest profile guys, but guys who can do a lot in the ring. Team Canada's Team Canada. I mean, I don't know if you have anything to add here. It's just the same guys. They've been running out for years at this point.
There is actually one difference, and that would be Tyson Dew, who I mentioned this to you, I believe, when we were going over this, because you thought Tyson Dew was someone else. And no, Tyson Dew is different than another Team Canada person. And they had a Team Canada guy called A1. You thought A1 and Tyson Dew were the same guy. They honestly, they could be, but they're not. They're actually different guys. Tyson Dew he's pretty good. TNA obviously gave him a shot here, as well as giving A1 a shot. Neither one of them did very well, unlike the other guys who were on Team Canada, like Eric Young, Petey Williams, who was basically the star of this whole tournament this year. Everyone was looking for Petey Williams because of the move, the Canadian Destroyer. That was the only thing that everyone was waiting to see throughout the entire tournament.
When he does that hand signal, the crowd goes crazy, and he does really well in using it to build counters. I'm going to spoil it here anyway. So Petey Williams has a one-on-one match with Jushin Thunder Liger, which is, it's not the best match you'll ever see, but it's a pretty cool match just to see these two guys. And Petey Williams is going to go for the Canadian Destroyer, and then Liger counters it, like weasels out of the hold or whatever he does, and then counters it into a palm strike. It's a really great sequence. But as you say, Petey Williams is just, he's so over. And I mentioned this to you before we started recording. He is just such a talented guy. You kind of wonder why he didn't take off. And you see a lot in all of the World X Cups he's a part of. He's the person you got to see. He's the one person, whatever he's doing, you can't take your eyes off him. And some of it is the Canadian Destroyer, but it does feel like that almost overshadows everything else because he's a really good worker. He does a lot of interesting stuff when he's in the ring.
Petey Williams is probably the best guy on his team, I would say, even though Eric Young is on the team as well. He's really good. Tyson Dew, probably the worst one of the team. Johnny Devine, also on this team. And he's interesting because he was in TNA, and I believe they were giving him a push for a little while. He was doing something with the paparazzi championship thing, which we're not even going to get into because that's a whole other thing. But he was doing stuff with them. And then he got stabbed in a bar fight, and he actually had to be written off of TNA for months. He ended up coming back, but I know that he was on the show for a while, got taken off because he got stabbed, came back. So he's an interesting character too. So the Team Canada team, very good team on paper. But yeah, Petey Williams, definitely the person that everyone wants to see this year. All right, so let's get into this tournament because this one is spread across a couple of events, a couple of impacts, and it's even on TNA Sacrifice as well, where they actually finalize it. And we'll get to the final because it's kind of weird towards the end, but the beginning part of the tournament's not bad. The tag team matches, not terrible. I actually did like the Team Mexico versus Team Canada match, which is Shocker and Magno against Eric Young and Johnny Devine. Really good match because pretty much all those guys could work. Never really saw Magno before, but he's actually good in the match. And Shocker, who is like, I believe in his mid 40s here, probably. I don't know. He's pretty old at this point. He's still a great worker at this point in the match. And the second round, they didn't have a lot of gimmick matches this year. It was mostly the tag matches, and then they had singles matches, and then they would get to round 3, which we'll get to, which was a gimmick match.
Yeah, so the singles matches, there was one on Impact that was Sabin defeating Puma. That was just kind of there. They didn't really get enough time to do it. And then Sacrifice would have two matches for the TNA World X Cup. So the opening match was actually that Petey Williams Juice and Thunder Liger match I talked about. Petey Williams loses that match, and it really puts Team Canada in a hole. And if you know anything about professional wrestling, you want to be in a hole going into the final match of any sort of tournament. So that brings us to the big 16-man gauntlet finale where the winner gets 5 points, and it basically means everyone's still alive, and everything up until this point was pointless, but let's not get into that. But yeah, all 16 competitors, they enter randomly, and it's really something else. Like, I've seen a lot of gauntlet matches before, and this one just had a really, really interesting pace to it.
So the final three of this match was Jay Lethal, American, Puma, Mexican, even though he's played by an American guy. And then you have Petey Williams, who's a Canadian. And the reason why I mention that is because the point totals mattered here. Because if you won, you got 5 points. Second place got 3 points. Third place gets 2 points. And then Team Japan, they only got 1 point because they came in fourth, and they're already out of this thing at this point.
So we get the final two, and it is Petey Williams and it is Puma. And Team Canada is trailing by 5 points. They haven't won anything. And because Team America was eliminated third to last, or second to last, I guess, they are on 5 points. So you can kind of see where this is going to head. Petey Williams defeats Puma. Team Canada wins, and there's a little confusion. Mike Tenay does a really good job of selling it as, oh, there's a tie. I don't know what happened. We never saw it coming, but I mean, we all know you did, Mike. And that moment is then totally ruined. Like, TNA is just going to TNA it all up because for some reason, big sexy Kevin Nash shows up.
Guy that's messing his heart out for 20 minutes, Mike. Proves absolutely nothing but what's
Big sexy Kevin Nash and his terrible theme music shows up to ruin everything and give Puma, 3 or 4 power bombs here. The poor guy loses the match, and then he gets power bombed a bunch of times. And then Kevin Nash leaves to his terrible theme song, and we have a tie, and they didn't announce anything. They didn't say what they're doing. They just ended it, and they went to the next match. We didn't know what they were doing until they got to Impact, where they ended up doing the tiebreaker match. Thanks, Kevin Nash.
Yeah, Kevin Nash is just like, I'm better than the X Division. Like, no shit, Sherlock, you're better than the X Division. So there's no clarity there. It just ends in a tie. No one knows what's going to happen. We do get the Impact in the next week, and we're going to have a sudden death tiebreaker between the captains of Team USA, Chris Sabin, and Team Canada, Petey Williams. Now, there is a catch because early on, they don't want any of Team Canada's outside interference shenanigans, so it's revealed that both of the remaining team members are going to be barred for ringside. Now, remember that because it's going to become a very important plot point in this. We do get the finale between Petey Williams and Chris Sabin, and this was a really good match. It really highlighted the stakes involved. It highlighted the talent of both Williams and Sabin. I really enjoyed this match, and it got some time to sort of breathe. You know, TNA has been occasionally guilty of condensing X Division matches into really small bite-sized chunks, and this one was given a good amount of time to tell a great story, and it made you believe that there were some stakes involved, especially because you have these two young guys, future faces, or actually they're really current faces of the X Division at this point, and they're just going at it. And then they're not.
And then it's interrupted once again by Kevin Nash and his terrible theme music as he comes through the backstage, choking some security guard. And then he comes out to the ring. And let me mention, by the way, Chris Sabin wins the match, wins for USA, is given this trophy that is like a double-decker trophy. I don't know. The trophy, why did they even give him a trophy? Like, at this point, I was so mad when I know you were mad about Kevin Nash, and I kind of was too, but I was more mad that they gave him a damn trophy. Like, I get it. You know, we're all mad nowadays about how all these wrestlers have all these belts, and, you know, how AEW gives a belt to people who win the Owen Hart tournament. Then WWE gives guys belts for winning titles in Saudi Arabia, so there's all these random belts and everywhere. But, I wish they would have given him a belt, because they give him this trophy and he gets to hold it for maybe 5 seconds before Kevin Nash and his music comes out to ruin it, and then break the trophy within 2 seconds of it and completely just make this whole tournament useless and no one cares anymore.
Just to add on to the trophy, I actually think Kevin Nash probably did everyone a favor, because who's keeping that trophy? Where are you even storing that trophy? Do you have 4 members of a team splitting one trophy? Is it a joint custody thing? The entire logistics of that trophy made no sense. So, I mean, I guess we can be thankful for Kevin Nash breaking it, but everything else he does is just stupid. He attacks Sabin. He goes on this long promo about how he's better than the X Division again. We get the faintest of hints that Alex Shelley is about to go do paparazzi productions with him. It's not even clear that, by the way.
No.
Alex Shelley comes down to the ring. He's filming stuff. You don't really know what the hell's going on.
No.
You just thought okay, I saw a good wrestling match that was ruined by some TNA bullshit, and that kind of sucked because it was really good, and it would have just been nice to let them have that moment. Kevin Nash wants to ruin the X Division or be part of the X Division or whatever. I still don't know what the hell this was about, but it ruined what was, by and large, from start to finish, something that was actually pretty good.
Yeah, they definitely had it down this year to where they made it exciting. The 2004 version was exciting as well, but this one they made it exciting because every match that was telling a story, and it was really telling the story of Team Canada through this whole tournament, because they had to kind of build their way up and really giving Petey Williams kind of a push, because like we said, he was really over. Everyone was looking for him to do that Canadian Destroyer. He did it in the one match where he did it to Puma, and it looked really awesome. But other than that, it was really a tournament to build up Team Canada and to build up, Team TNA, which was already built, because like we mentioned, by this point, Chris Sabin was a multiple TNA X Division champion, and I believe he was going to be a tag team champion pretty soon. So he was pretty well built up. It was really to help build up Team Canada this tournament, except Kevin Nash ruined it, and then his theme music came out and it was awful.
Ridiculous. Just sickening to watch.
It wasn't to build up Team Canada or Pete Williams. It was to build up Kevin Nash, who of course obviously needed that push. He'd been injured for about a year up to this point, and he mentions he hasn't been in a ring in forever and a day. So yeah, let's just have him kill this tournament thing and his bad still DRE knockoff theme music. And then, of course, this all leads to the Paparazzi Championship Series, which is another story for another time.
Yeah, we're not doing that now.
Let's take the one thing everyone hates about college football and bring it to TNA. Okay, so that's done and dusted. We don't hear about the TNA World X Cup. It becomes a biannual thing, though. So 2008 comes along, and we see the teams here. The teams, wrestling-wise, they're not quite what they were in 2006. You have Team USA, Team Mexico, Team Japan, who's got one of my favorite wrestlers we'll talk about in a minute, and then Team International is replacing Team Canada because they are no longer around. They broke that up. Thankfully, that means no more A1 matches, but it also left a lot of those guys sort of drifting out into the ether. Petey Williams kind of needed Team Canada. It was kind of his thing. Bobby Roode does go on to do great things, but in that immediate aftermath, despite being proclaimed a future heavyweight champion by Scott D'Amore, that immediate aftermath for Bobby Roode wasn't great, but these aren't discussions for here and now. When you look at the teams, Team Mexico kicks ass. I forgot that they had this team, and I don't know, when you saw the Team Mexico lineup, what did you think about this?
I mean, number one, it's awesome. You have the most awesome team captain. You have Ultimo Guerrero as your damn captain. I mean, you can't really beat that at that point. Then you have Averno. You have Ray Bucanero before his being a crazy whatever psychopath he is in Mexico now. And then you have a masked Volador Jr. who's got to be his early 20s at this point, and he's just flying around being awesome. So that's a pretty awesome team right there. And I just wanted to mention Team TNA, which is captained by Kaz. You have Alex Shelley, and of course you have Chris Sabin because he's in all these X Cups. And then you have Curryman. Why isn't Curryman in Team International? He is international, right? Like, obviously we know, Curryman is being played by an American person. I guess we kind of know that now, but at this point, like, Curryman's, he's supposed to be a Japanese man, right? Like he's not supposed to be an American person. So I just don't understand why he's not on the international team. Like Davari actually makes more sense to be on the Team TNA team, but since he's a dirty heel, he can't be on the TNA team, I guess. I don't know.
Davari leading heavy into that like Middle East thing that was never really cleared. And despite the fact that he had admitted to being American, like he was an American in WWE just a few years before that. Curry Man makes more sense on Team International or Team Japan because he's promoting Japanese curry. And then speaking of Team Japan, Puma has now switched his allegiance to Team Japan now from being on Team Mexico. You have Naruki Doi. There's Masato Yoshina. These aren't particularly well known. They're okay, but the captain of the team is Milano Collection AT. I love Milano Collection AT. It's actually my wife's favorite wrestling gimmick of all time, by the way. She walked in and saw Milano Collection AT, and it just immediately, she got everything about it. She knew everything about it. And Milano Collection AT is a really underrated wrestler. He doesn't get a chance to show it here a lot, but just someone I'm a huge fan of. And we end up getting to the tournament, and I found myself conflicted about this tournament because there's interesting things that happened, and it feels like the most complete tournament, but I don't know if it just had the moments of 04 or 06.
Yeah, this tournament, they definitely knew how to make it make sense, and they didn't have too many gimmicks in it, especially in the first two rounds.
The first two rounds were kind of a blink and you miss it affair. They were just, the first round were tag matches on Impact, and then they had some singles matches on Impact. None of these are given a lot of time. They're kind of just, I don't want to say throwaway, but they're really, they're not relevant to the story. It's all about Victory Road 08. The opener for this match is a 4-team, 12-man match that is one of the more exciting matches in TNA, probably in 08. And they did a lot of good stuff in 08. They did some really bad stuff in 08 as well. But this was one of those matches where I sat down and watched from start to finish, and I was like, holy crap, this is really good.
Yeah, and it's 3 men from each team because they save 1 man for the Ultimate X match later in the night. So you got 3 men on each team, and you have Alex Shelley, Chris Sabin, and Curry Man for Team TNA. For Team Japan, you have Masato Yoshina, you have Milano Collection AT, and you have Puma. For Mexico, you have Averno, Rey Bucanero, and Ultimo Guerrero, which I was kind of annoyed because I wanted Ultimo Guerrero in that Ultimate X match. I thought that would have been cooler, but, you know, we can't get everything. And then for Team International, you have Alex Kozlov, Doug Williams, and Tyson Dew. So every team has at least somebody who can be pretty good. You got Doug Williams there, who's a awesome wrestler, and I mean, they gave a lot of time. They gave him about 25 minutes to do this match, and it's probably the best match on this entire card, which kind of isn't saying much, but it definitely is the best match of this tournament, I guess, too.
As you say, they get a lot of time. It doesn't feel rushed. That was always the big complaint about the X division, is a lot of the times it's just all rushed. And despite having 12 guys involved at various points, it never felt rushed, and it was always exciting. It always cut that pace. And Alex Shelley ends up winning it, and then that sets up the finale there, which ends in Ultimate X, which I think makes sense for the World X Cup to have it end in an Ultimate X match. And this one was, well, it had some interesting cats involved.
Yeah, it certainly did. You have Naruki Doi, who I really never saw before except through this tournament. And I mean, he does a pretty great job here. Davari, who has done this match, I believe, afterwards. I don't think he's ever done this match before. And then you have Kaz, who has done this match several times. And then Volador Jr., who I was really interested in seeing because, like I mentioned before, he's quite young at this point. I believe this is one of the first few times he has been in America. And he actually wins this match. And it's a pretty awesome match because of one pretty awesome spot with Kaz and Davari. And I mean, it's super scary. Number one, you have no idea what Davari's even doing because he's just kind of hanging from the bar. He's sort of trying to shimmy his way to the X, but he kind of gives up halfway through because he has to make sure he's in the right spot for Kaz. And then Kaz, you think, is going to do the thing where he jumps from the post to the middle, which we have seen before. People do that to win the match, but instead he just does an awesome leg drop on him, and it makes everyone just, you know, blow a gasket because I mean, it was kind of the craziest thing they saw that night. So yeah, I mean, that's probably the main thing I remember from this match. And you don't really remember Volador Jr. winning this match and also winning the X Cup as well because of winning this match. You more remember Kaz's awesome leg drop.
There were a few really cool spots leading up to this, but as you say, that leg drop spot was one of the most wild moments in TNA history. I wasn't even expecting that. Like, I didn't remember this match or that moment because it's something TNA never replays. But when you have Kaz just dropping, it's barely a leg drop. It's almost like he just puts a boot on Daivari's throat while making a leg drop motion. It's super dangerous, but it really added the stakes to the match. And the match feels like everybody wants to win. It feels like everyone is trying their damnedest to win this tournament. And you see that with a few other spots. There's some Naoki Doi does some pretty cool spots in there. And even you have someone like Daivari, who we don't think Daivari is this death-defying X Division style wrestler, but he does some stuff in this match that really shows he wasn't afraid to get a little crazy when the time came. Volador Jr., you don't get the Volador Jr. we've come to expect later on in his career. And I'm not sure if he wasn't fully comfortable with the match itself. It's a really weird match to find yourself thrust into. So Volador Jr., he has some spots in there that are cool, but it's not that high flying Volador Jr. we're going to come to know and love a few years down the road. It's a little more muted, and he does drop the X after he takes off the carabiner, because of course he does, because that's Ultimate X. You drop the X and that's just what happens. But he still wins. You can see he drops the X and there's this sense of like, oh no, what have I done? So he like drops down
yeah, I know.
to reclaim the X.
Oh, I know. He looked like he was going to break his leg. I was like, oh my God, because, you're dropping down from this height and you're not ready for it. And I was like, oh, don't break your leg on this. Like, this is the worst thing. And also, it took him like 10 seconds to get the carabiner off. So that's probably not helpful. So yeah, like you were saying, this probably isn't the best match to be putting a young wrestler in who really isn't ready for it, but he did a really good job. And yeah, like you mentioned, the match is great. So after young Volador Jr. wins this Ultimate X match, he is in the ring with Mike Tenay, who for some reason is doing an interview with guys who can't speak English.
Yeah, so Mike Tenay is in the ring interviewing the victorious Team Mexico. He invites Julio Urbina into the ring to translate, who is a very uneven translator because he translates Mike Tenay's questions word for word. Volador Jr. speaks for 45 seconds. Ultimo Guerrero speaks for another 45 seconds a minute. And Julio Urbina gives like the shortest translations. It was like, yeah, Volador Jr. says, thanks, Mike. And it's like, he clearly didn't. He said more than that. Like, just translate for you. He translated every last thing Mike Tenay said. That aside, the trophy is back for the World X Cup, and it is crappier than ever.
Yeah, it's not as big as the other one, and at least they have like 4 cups on it to kind of show that there's 4 teams. But yeah, it looks like a trophy you'd spend maybe $20 at a sporting goods store getting, and the guys are more proud to hold the X than they are to actually hold the trophy at this point. So it kind of looks like nobody cares about the actual trophy. Ultimo Guerrero would actually rather hold the Mexican flag than he would hold this crappy trophy at this point.
It's an odd way to wrap things up. And the crowd isn't really into it because Team Mexico isn't presented as heels, but you're in the United States, so it's hard to get people into it. And it kind of just... it fell a little flat here. I think if there was a little more clarity as far as like, we're Team Mexico, boo America, maybe you could have got a little more heat there. It just didn't really come together that way. Probably due in some part to whatever Julio Urbina lost in translation. And then that's it for the TNA World X Cup, because it's gone. We don't get another one in 2010 because TNA's doing a whole bunch of other stuff in 2010. Eventually, TNA does sort of dust up the World Cup idea in the 2010s. Later on, it's part of that one night only thing they did that no one ever cares about or remembers. And these weren't X Division exclusive either. They were just, hey, here's some international guys. We're going to fight for whatever the prize is. Not as good as this. The TNA World X Cup, it's easy to forget it happened because TNA was just throwing a lot of stuff on the wall and seeing what stuck. But when you think about wrestling tournaments, what are your thoughts on how the World X Cup stacks up?
It's definitely better than any other TNA tournament that involved lots of standings and points. they would do a lot more later on that were not good. So they actually did a pretty good job of organizing this to where we didn't have, teams having more matches than others or point totals not making sense. Like at least the point totals made sense. And the 2006 and 2008 editions really had a storyline to it as well. Like you mentioned before, how Team Mexico, no one knew who they were because they didn't really promote them on the pay-per-view, and this was on the pay-per-view too. So when you're at a pay-per-view, you're not really, you don't sometimes you don't really know what's going on the TV show. And especially TNA, they really didn't have a lot of people who were at their pay-per-views who knew what the heck was going on most of the time. So if you have a bunch of Mexican guys speaking Spanish in there, it's unless you spoke Spanish, you don't really know what's going on. So that would be my only negative, I guess, with the final edition. 2006, there's obviously a lot of negatives, and they mostly involve Kevin Nash. And then 2004, my only drawback to that is that they kind of made it confusing with all those preview matches. And then towards the end, you kind of knew like, oh, nobody has a shot at winning this. It's going to be Team USA or Team NWA, whatever, that's going to win this. And it really, mostly what I was watching for was to see Scott D'Amore do something nefarious in all these matches, because that's pretty much what that tournament was building up for. So I could see them totally doing this again, TNA, because they probably do have enough wrestlers now, especially to do it, especially since they used a lot of guys from AAA, and they use a lot of guys from WWE as well. So they could totally do this again with a bunch of people. And I kind of hope they do it again.
When I think of the TNA World X Cup, I do place it in one of the best wrestling tournaments, not necessarily from the execution. Everything was perfect, because it wasn't, and rarely, if ever, was anything TNA did perfect or even good. You can see what they were going for there. It made a lot of sense. It utilized the X division, which didn't always have a lot of stuff happening for it. There weren't always storylines to get the X division on TV. There weren't always storylines to tap into the international partnerships TNA had. This did a great job of utilizing both of those advantages it does or did have at that time. It gets bogged down in a few issues. Kevin Nash sort of ruining 2006, 2008, maybe not having the time placed on making sure the audience knew who everyone was or why they were important. It was never the best from a pure in-ring wrestling standpoint, but from an idea of here's something we're going to get people to fight over. It made all the sense in the world. And that's why I classify it as being maybe not the best, but it was really good for what it was at the time. And as you say, they could definitely bring this idea back. It's super easy to sell patriotism and nationalism in wrestling. It's the oldest trope in the book, so that's kind of a good idea to tap into as well. The one thing I also want to highlight is Mike Tenay's commentary through all this, because he's so in his wheelhouse. You can tell how much he enjoys being able to talk about all of this stuff and celebrate all of this stuff. And this is what Mike Tenay loves doing as a wrestling announcer. And Don West is a really good partner for him, because Don West obviously doesn't know what's happening, but in many ways, he's almost like the viewer in that regard, where a lot of people watching probably don't know who these guys are or why they're here. And so he's kind of setting Mike Tenay up to get to those answers. And I mean, I'm a big Don West guy. Like, I know he's stupid, and I know he did a lot of things that you're just like, oh, you little cringy. I enjoy Don West's work. And I think here, as being the guy who didn't know anything about the international scene and having Mike Tenay there, it balanced it out, and it did add to the overall package. I just wish Kevin Nash wasn't around with his still DRE ripoff in 2006.
Yeah, totally agree with you on Kevin Nash. Agree with you on Don West as well, who didn't really become beloved until about 10 years after this, until almost he was out of the company by this point. And, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. So a lot of people always like to say how they like him now. But at this point, people were kind of annoyed with him because he would just be kind of like a dumb fan. He really didn't know what was going on a lot of times, but he really did show a lot of excitement, especially in those Ultimate X matches, man. He was into all of those matches. He's into the ladder match. He's into the flag match. He's into a lot of these matches, and that's really what made it fun too. And I know that's really what Mike Tenay liked as well. Mike Tenay really loves to work with somebody who is kind of a dummy who kind of doesn't know, so that the person can kind of ask him, and then TNA can kind of just ramble on and give you a whole bunch of stats. That's why he always really liked Bobby Heenan, because Bobby Heenan would kind of play the act of being a dummy and just asking a bunch of questions, and then TNA can ramble on. So that's why, towards the end there, especially '08, you really see Don West really knowing how to work. But yeah, this is a perfect tournament for Mike Tenay, and if TNA ever brings it back, they should definitely bring back Mike Tenay to at least do the intro packages, because that's definitely what you need for these tournaments. TNA did not do it for all of them. They did it for some of these guys, but not for all of these guys, because especially that 2006 tournament, I really didn't know who half of those Mexican guys were, and the Japanese guys either. You really didn't know who they were a lot of times either, unless, it was somebody who had come over here before. Then you kind of knew who they were, but they really needed a lot of those intro packages to make these tournaments better.
For sure. And just putting this into the context of wider wrestling, America's never had the G1 or anything like that, all of those prestigious Japanese tournaments. And even if you look around what's happening at wrestling at this time, as far as tournaments are concerned, all WWE is doing are beat the clock challenges or 6-pack challenges or whatever those things were. They aren't doing anything like this. TNA isn't doing anything like this, because anytime they do a tournament, it's Paparazzi Championship Series, and we keep talking about it because, let's be honest, I really want to talk about it, but that's not here nor there. So it was just really cool to tap into this global perspective. It would be the foundation for some of these guys' careers to take off. I mean, we talk about Goto, recently IWGP champion. You have Taichi. And then you have some of the old veterans like Ultimo Guerrero, who's obviously later on in his career, Jerry Lynn. It was just this confluence of everything that made the X division so unique, so special, and the world of professional wrestling special. And that's why I think the TNA World Cup does deserve its credit for being a really good wrestling tournament.
Yes, we are in agreement. We both like this. It could have been better, but it was still a very good outing for TNA, because they wouldn't do too many better tournaments later on. Paparazzi Championship, Bound for Glory series. We'll talk about those later. But anyway, thank you so much for checking us out. Make sure you give us a comment below. Make sure you subscribe. You can also check out our other sports channels like The Touchback, also Wrong Sports. Link are in the description below. And just a reminder, if you are a special guest ref during the TNA World X Cup Championship match,
get the hell out of the ring after the finish, because Kevin Nash needs to ruin everything for everyone.